Rob, if you'll go ahead and start us off with the third step prayer, please.
It would be my pleasure. And you can find the third step prayer on page 63 of your big book. And hopefully everybody's got their big book and are ready to go. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And I do thy will always.
All right. Well, we left off at the top of page 145 last week. We're going to go ahead and go back one paragraph. So we'll be at the bottom of page 144 on your employee's return.
At the bottom, page 144, everybody. On your employee's return, talk with him. Ask him if he thinks he has the answer. If he feels free to discuss his problems with you. If he knows you understand and will not be upset by anything he wishes to say, you will probably be off to a fast start.
Yeah, so we're talking about somebody here that is coming back from rehab and is found some level of trust in you. Hopefully, that's what we're trying to gain, and some understanding, some knowledge that you understand what this person is going through, and with that, you would, if they are, just getting back, probably don't have a sponsor yet, and in this case, you could help guide them to a few meetings, listen to what they've, kind of talk about their experience, what they've gotten so far, how they're feeling, and try and offer up some opportunities to get into the book, etc. So there's any number of ways that a conversation like this can go. Certainly, if you are an employer, you could talk about, the person's position, the confidentiality that you have maintained and will continue to maintain, and the support that you can afford to extend to them, just kind of setting expectations, etc. If you're a sponsor and or if you're somebody that's helping to get somebody out of that is just coming out of rehab and guidance, a lot of the same things can happen with regard to the level of support, confidentiality, just the reinforcement of the fact that you're there and available to assist in just about any way that is possible, and then take it from there. Rob?
Here we're at the top of page 145, everybody. In this connection, can you remain undisturbed if the man proceeds to tell you shocking things? He may, for example, reveal that he has padded his expense account, or that he has planned to take your best customers away from you. In fact, he may say almost anything if he has accepted our solution, which, as you know, demands rigorous honesty. Can you charge this off as you would a bad account and start fresh with him? If he owes you money, you may wish to make terms.
Sure. So, undisturbed. If something was to be shocking, if you could hear it, I think that we're all human. It's going to matter. It's going to depend upon what you hear. It's going to depend on who it is that's hearing, etc. So there's some kind of qualifications there, I would say. And if you were, he was going to leave the company and take your best customers away from you and that sort of thing, I think it might be a little bit difficult to maintain a lot of composure, but certainly if you are able to, then I would say hats off to you. But the idea here is what we're trying to get through, and this is kind of, instead of doing the what ifs, because we could what if this went to death, it's really the openness of this person could be quite stark, meaning that they could tell you just about anything, and on the one hand, you want to make sure that you realize that this person trusts you, that this is in confidence. And as a sponsor, for example, if you've taken anybody through their step 4 and 5, you have heard quite a bit of stuff. In fact, the more thorough a step 5 is, or 4 and 5, I guess, the more you're going to hear. And even in the rooms, there are sometimes that you can hear people tell stories that are quite shocking as well. So, just take it with a grain of salt. Be prepared for just about anything, and work things out as best you can with that individual for going forward. If they are doing the step 5 with you, you're probably a sponsor for them, and you should be prepared for that. That's, again, there's a way of receiving a step 5, there's a way of delivering a step 5, but there's also a way of receiving. Rob?
Yeah, they talk here on page 145, it demands rigorous honesty. Where else did we hear that? Well, on page 58, on how it works, they talked about it, about honesty and being honest with ourselves. Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunate. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those who suffer from grave emotional mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. 3 times they mention that. We hear that at every meeting. So what is this program about? Being honest with ourselves and with those around us. The first thing we gain when we come into this program is humility. We say, we don't know what to do. Everything I've tried has failed. So can you help me? What's the first thing we lose when we go back out? Humility. I got it. I know what to do now. And where does that lead us? It leads us back to a drink. Page 145. If he speaks of his home situation, you can undoubtedly make helpful suggestions. Can he talk frankly with you so long as he does not bear business tales or criticize his associates? With this kind of employee, such an attitude will command undying loyalty.
Yeah, so we're a couple of things here is that, it's one thing to hear about his or her situation. It's in the private and somewhat personal nature of what they might be sharing with you is one thing, but to talk about business or criticize associates or criticize other people. Remember, we don't criticize the other person. In our situation, as we go through the steps, we're only really critical of ourselves, and we're very careful not to cross the street and be on the other side of the street. We keep our side of the street clean, and so does this as well. If there are some things going on at home, certainly some suggestions can be made. We all can do that because we've all had our own situation with regard to the home front. So that should be a fairly easy thing to do. Rob?
Yeah, the greatest enemies of us alcoholics are resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. Whenever men are gathered together in business, there will be rivalries, and arising out of these, a certain amount of office politics. Sometimes we alcoholics have an idea that people are trying to pull us down. Often this is not so at all. But sometimes their drinking will be used politically.
Sorry about that. These are going to be tough things to overcome, especially if somebody's not got as much guidance as you have gotten. Obviously, where there's competition, and the idea behind that is that sometimes competition is healthy and good because it motivates other people to do better than they might otherwise. But sometimes it gets to the point where there's people backstabbing each other, They're achieving things off of somebody else's back, and that's never good. And the idea is that other people can start to pull people down, especially if they find out that you've got a disease such as alcoholism and that you're struggling with it and everything. They can use that against you, and that is never good. In this case, the alcoholic, the person you're talking to and everything, needs to understand this and steer clear of all of that. Um, and try to stay out of that. Hopefully, as a business, you have been able to keep things somewhat confidential to the point that there's not an issue or a challenge there. Rob?
Yeah. It talks about here the greatest enemies of us alcoholics are resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. Now, what did it say on page 64? Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease, where we've been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Okay, so it could cause us to go out, and it also talks about a certain amount of office politics. Now, I'm going to change this around a little bit. Let's go talk about in the fellowship, in the rooms of AA. When somebody is talking badly about somebody else, do we listen and do we join in? Or do we say, you know what? Hey, that is not right. We have to protect our sponsees, but we have to protect other people. Why? Because we're dealing with other people's life. Somebody finds out that somebody else is saying bad things about them, they might never come back to the room. They will never get what is freely given in this book, which is the program. And too many people who don't get the program don't give up the drink and end up dying because of it. So please, remember, office politics and AA politics are not different. So we have to protect the people that are in the rooms with us. So please, please remember that. One instant comes to mind in which a malicious individual was always making friendly little jokes about an alcoholic drinking exploits. In this way, he was slyly carrying tales. In another case, an alcoholic was sent to a hospital for treatment. Only a few knew of it at first, but within a short time, it was billboarded throughout the entire company. Naturally, this sort of thing decreased the man's chance of recovery. The employer can many times protect the victim from this kind of talk. The employer cannot play favorite, but he can always defend a man from needless provocation and unfair criticism.
Yep, that's true. And this is where leadership comes to play. And it's sometimes it's really difficult when something gets out and about and everybody's talking about it. Trying to shut that down is not an easy thing to do. You have to squash it as best you can, and then from there, there has to be potentially, some repercussions for the people that perpetuate the discussions and the use of this information against an individual. Unfortunately, sometimes it can become so tainted in the situation that it becomes almost impossible to fix. It's kind of like once the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to put him back in, as far as that goes. So if this shouldn't and wouldn't be going on as an individual from a sponsor standpoint, we all talk about ourselves relatively openly with regard to the fellowship and everything, and we all kind of have an understanding that it goes no farther than that, and we've all kind of been there, done that, so we're all kind of birds of a feather with regard to that. But in this case, what we're talking about is clearly somebody's being singled out. They're being ridiculed in a way that is detrimental to not only the individual, but to the business as a whole. It impacts the business as well. And as a leader, you're going to have to be able to maneuver through that and deftly handle the you know, the naysayers and the ones that are at fault, and get them back on track through whatever means is possible. Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to take this back to the fellowship. You know, if somebody has a slip and they come back into the rooms, everybody knows it. Everybody talks about it. And then some smart ass goes up to them and says, "Thanks for going out for me. I really appreciate that." You know what? That is not helpful. All we're doing, you're putting the person down. You know, you know how difficult it is for people to slink back into the rooms. They're feeling bad enough as it is. They feel like not only have they let themselves down, they've let the whole group down. It's tough enough to get up and get a 24-hour chip. We all clap for them, wish them luck, and we're there for them. But when you go up to somebody and say, "Thanks for going out for me," that is not helpful. We're supposed to build people up, not pull them down. And that is the thing about the fellowship. We build each other up, because you know what? We dragged the structures down all around us. We're feeling like the worst thing on earth sometimes. We need love and support. That's why we hug each other. Put the fires out. When you grab somebody and you're patting them on the back, we're putting the fire out. We're trying to give them reassurance that things are going to be okay, because they don't know how things are going to go. So please keep that in mind. As a class, alcoholics are energetic people. They work hard and they play hard. Your man should be on his mettle to make good. Being somewhat weakened and faced with physical and mental readjustment to a life which knows no alcohol, he may overdo. He may have to curb his desire to work 16 hours a day. He may need to encourage him to play once in a while. He may wish to do a lot for other alcoholics, and something of the sort may come up during business hours. A reasonable amount of latitude will be helpful. This work is necessary to maintain his sobriety.
Absolutely. I'll start there at the very end. This work is necessary to maintain his sobriety. We're talking about nothing keeps you sober more than working with another alcoholic. It's on page 89. If you look back there, and we can see that if you kind of go up a little bit more here, being somewhat weakened and faced with physical and mental readjustment, this is something that's fixed with a really solid step 11. In regards to adjustment to a life which knows no alcohol. It may overdo to a certain extent, and that is that people will bury themselves in their work. They'll bury themselves in working with other people, all of which is good things to be involved in, but not necessarily to the extent as to what they're talking about here. On the other side of it, though, is that that wanting to work with other alcoholics is certainly important. That's your step 12, and obviously that is a goal that you want to achieve. Now, this is assuming that the person's been through the steps and is well on their way. Some help if they're going through the steps with other alcoholics is one thing, but to really jump in with both feet to help somebody, you want to try to have been through all of the first 11 steps before you really jump into that 12 step wholeheartedly. But nonetheless, there is some truth to the work hard, play hard kind of mentality of alcoholics. Obviously, it takes all kinds, and the adjustment to being alcohol free is one that takes quite a while, and one that can take several months, as a matter of fact. Even after you've sobered up and are well on your way to recovery, there are still certain physical and mental things that can be improved on over time as well. So all of this is good as long as it's kept in check. Rob?
Yeah, you'll hear the term balance used quite often, because what happens is that we don't have a lot of balance in our life. And it's hard to, they talk about dividing the pie evenly. Well, if you know how to divide a pie evenly, my hats are off to you, because I've never been able to do it in my life. I'm either going 150% or I'm not going at all. And when I delve into something, I delve into it with both feet. I'm in there. I'm in there like a dirty shirt. And then all of a sudden I might just give it up. And everybody around me is going, what happened? I just had enough. I had overdone it and I've taxed myself to the point where I don't want to do it anymore. I've done it, you know? Now, here they're talking about the worker. Now, if the worker is trying to make up for the financial stuff that he had lost through his drinking, okay, we're going to learn later on that if we put anything before a spiritual, we're going to lose it. So that's why it's important that we keep the spiritual as number one. We have to keep. I always do this. This is me. This is God. There's got to be that connection. And if I lose that connection, and it starts to waver, how far away until the obsession of the mind returns and I'm going to start drinking again? Okay, so I have to keep that spiritual. How do I do that? Well, through self-serve, helping others in hard work. Page 14 and 15. Okay, I'll put the quote in because I'm butchering it right now because I'm trying to come up with things to say. But the whole idea is balance. Balance, balance, balance. Look after the family. We've neglected them for so long. Okay, look after our friends. Look after our spiritual. Okay, try to divide the pie as evenly as possible. You'll never divide it evenly, but we try our best that we can. After your man is gone along without drinking for a few months, you may be able to make use of his services with other employees who are giving you the alcoholic runaround, provided, of course, they are willing to have a third party in the picture. An alcoholic who has recovered but holds a relatively unimportant job can talk to a man with a better position. Being on a radically different basis of life, you will never take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, a couple of kind of neat things in here. Obviously, you're building kind of your own fellowship within the organization that you're leading, and in doing so, you're able to pull together additional resources to help other alcoholics, other people that have drinking problems and are looking for help within the organization. Um, the interesting thing here is that they talk about somebody that is somebody that's relatively unimportant, meaning that maybe there's somebody subordinate to somebody senior, that the senior person's looking for help, and the subordinate one is the one that has recovered and can offer up some guidance and some suggestion and support with regard to the senior person's getting better. Obviously, they're making an assumption here that they will never take an advantage of that situation. But it's as we see in the rooms and as we see with sponsors and sponsees, both young and old, rich and poor, well off, not well off, healthy, unhealthy, et cetera, et cetera. There's a combination there that there's no qualifiers. Somebody that is a sponsor or somebody that's being asked to sponsor somebody else, there may be some major differences in the socioeconomic situation, and nowhere have I ever seen somebody say, well, this person doesn't make as much as I do, so I'm not gonna work with them. That's just not, I've just never heard that. So I think that this is not only true for a business, but it's also true in just not in a not work life as well. One little factoid I'll bring up here is that and Rob had kind of emphasized it. It says, who has recovered? So we're using the word recovered, which is the 17th time we've used it in the book so far. And it turns out that it'll be the last time that they use it in the book right here. But it has been used 17 times throughout the book up until this point, and the word recovered is certainly there. And we've had some good conversations about that and alcoholics. Rob?
Now, why could a man who has recovered be able to help somebody else that is still in the throes of alcoholism? Well, let's go to page 18 for a second. But the expert, and this is in squiggly writing, so it must be important, right, Leo?
Yes, it is.
But the excellent
Yes, it is.
drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. Now, we have to remember something. If somebody else is not ready to give up alcohol, we move on. Okay? Not everybody, thinks that they're an alcoholic. They might think that they're controlling and enjoying themselves. Okay. And if that's the case, my hats are off to you. You know what? You're not an alcoholic, or you don't think you are one. It's not up for me to decide whether you're an alcoholic or not. That's for you to decide. I show you the facts. This is what makes an alcoholic. Okay. Do you have those symptoms? We can go to page 44 where you ask those questions. You know, but if the person doesn't want to give up drink, we move on. Okay, it told us this in the book. Okay, page 96. We move on and we look for another alcoholic who wants to give it up. Okay, somebody we can work with, somebody that wants it more than anything else in this world. So, your man may be trusted. Long experience with alcohol excuses naturally arouses suspicion. When his wife next calls saying he's sick, you might jump to the conclusion he is drunk. If he is and is still trying to recover, he will tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job. For he knows he must be honest if he would live at all. He will appreciate knowing you are not bothering your head about him, that you are not suspicious, nor are you trying to run his life, so he will be shielded from temptation to drink. If he is conscientiously following the program of recovery, he can go anywhere your business may call him.
Yeah, so it's a good reference here. One with regard to the fact that here's a person that's going through recovery that you've had good conversations with, that there's a good trust and there's a bond that's there. You get a phone call that this person is sick, and naturally there is the jumping to conclusions. Maybe this person is drunk again, that type of thing. If so, and you know that this person is really trying to stop drinking, you can make a quick assessment to continue to work with this person, especially if they're upfront and honest with you after the fact, and they're back onto this road of recovery. It's tough, but it is possible. I know, I guess in my own situation, I had a couple of 30-day breaks and or slips, and my first sponsor didn't just drop me right away. I talked to him about it both times, and still was able to follow in the path of recovery. Now, the flip side of it, and we're not really talking about that here, although it's kind of inferred. If they're not willing to stop, this is back to what Rob was just talking about, and that is to move on to another alcoholic. And in this case, because we're talking about an employer, it may be that the contract that you had with this person is broken, and it may be the loss of a job that is necessary in order for everybody to move on and to get better in time. Certainly, you do not want your business to be brought down because of somebody's alcoholism. That's obviously important. But let's keep it on the positive. Let's assume that this person just was sick. Maybe they had the flu, etc., and everything is fine, and they're still on track, and they're conscientiously continuing to follow the program. Rob?
Yeah, if he's conscientiously following the program of recovery, he can go anywhere your business may call him. Where else do we read that? One of my favorite pages, 101, where they talk about the Eskimo and the Greenland ice cap. And here they talk about, in our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. And that's, if we have a legitimate reason for being there, we can go anywhere your business calls on him to go. Okay, he can go to the bar and he can have, water or whatever they so choose other than alcoholic drink, obviously. So we're not trying to shield or keep them away from it, because that has always failed. That's what the first 100 found. When they tried to shield themselves from it, it didn't work. Okay, so if you have a legitimate reason for being there, by all means, go there. As long as you are in fit spiritual condition. Remember that. If. That's a big if. In case he does stumble even once, you will have to decide whether to let him go. If you are sure he doesn't mean business, there is no doubt you should discharge him. If, on the contrary, you are sure he is doing his utmost, you may wish to give him another chance, but you should feel under no obligation to keep him on, for your obligation has been well discharged already.
Yeah, we just talked about this to some extent. So it is really a case-by-case basis. You have to really evaluate the person for their earnestness and their honesty, what their focus is, and whether or not they really do truly want to quit. And you can pretty much tell that within a discussion or two with them. But in there is if they're not sincere, okay, remember there's some sincerity here, but if they're not sincere about what they're trying to do, it may be best to let them go. But you are sure he is doing his utmost, then you will do your best to keep them on and continue to work with them. There may be a little bit more of back and forth on the steps, and really getting into the book, and then really talking with other alcoholics, that type of thing. That type of work is something that you really want to get to make sure that you've got. I think that there's really some good stuff that can come out of this. I learned from my mistakes. I learned from my slips. I learned a lot of things about myself, and it reinforced my stronger recovery. So I would tell you that this is certainly something to take very seriously, and realize that people are going to have slips. They are going to relapse, and they still can come out the other end of it recovered. So it's just it's something you want to really dig into and figure out. Rob?
Yeah, we have to remember A is for those who cannot stop. If we could stop on our own, we wouldn't be here. We would be out either in the rain or the sunshine or doing something else. We wouldn't be here. Okay. So, and the thing I love about this book is that they tell us something, they tell us again, and then they tell us again. And that's why I go back to different pages, because, they're just hammering home a point. But they'll say it in different ways so that, you might not have got it the first time. You might not have got it the second time, but the third time, it clicks. Okay, on page 35. Okay, and we're talking about Jim. Okay, we told him what we know of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him. He didn't give up on her. Why didn't they give up on her? Because Jim wanted to get the help that he needed, but he just didn't know what to do. So they had to reinforce in him that he had to enlarge his spiritual life. Okay, now I talked about that in the last paragraph, and I put it in the chat. How to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life? Through work and self-sacrifice on page 14 and 15. Okay, that is what it's all about, and also it talks here on page 96. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Okay, they might not get it at the beginning, but we work with them until they don't want to do it themselves. If they don't want to do the work, we don't waste our time. Okay, and it's not a waste of time. We planted a seed. Okay, so what we do is we move on to somebody else that wants to help right now. The person that we planted the seed, we hope that it'll take root and it'll start to sprout, and that they will call us when they're ready. But until that time, we can't spend too much time on any one person, because we're denying somebody else of what we can give them. Okay? There's another thing you might wish to do. If your organization is a large one, your junior executives might be provided with this book. You might let them know you have no quarrel with the alcoholics of your organization. These juniors are often in a difficult position. Many of them are frequently their friends. So for one reason or another, they cover these men. Hoping matters will take a turn for the better. They often jeopardize their own position by trying to help serious drinkers who should have been fired long ago, or else given an opportunity to get well.
Yeah, and I think that, we're talking about letting somebody go. We're getting into layers here, is what I kind of said, layers of leadership and where things are. You make sure that there's no quarrel, that you're there to support, you're there to help. Obviously, there is some truth, quite a bit of it, to keeping somebody on that wants to get sober and wants to recover. But the idea here is that you've got people that are friends and they kind of cover for each other. And that's not a good situation to have, because obviously things are slipping, but it's being hidden, or it's being hidden from you. The fact is that that type of, hiding poor or bad work, regardless of whether it's because of an alcoholic or not, is not a good thing to have in a business. So, the alcoholism is just a symptom here in this regard, with regard to the poor or bad business. They're not showing up on time, not showing up at all, or being, showing up drunk, being in front of customers when you're under the influence. None of those things are acceptable business behaviors, and should be dealt with accordingly. And they would be done the same thing. Somebody that doesn't show up for work, that isn't an alcoholic, they're still not showing up for work. After a period of time, you're going to let them go. Same thing for an alcoholic. After a period of time, you're just going to let them go. And you want to make sure that that type of behavior is not perpetuated throughout the organization, or otherwise you're going to lose your customer base, and you're going to lose the business. And that's not the idea here. The idea here is to help those that would help themselves, that that can and will commit themselves to a program of recovery, and do an open and honest job of it. Rob?
Yeah, this chapter was written by Hank Parkhurst. Now, if you don't know who Hank Parkhurst is, he pushed Bill to get this book written so that he could go out and sell it. Hank Parkhurst was a dynamo when it came to sales. Not only is he a dynamo, but he even puts it in the book here. If your organization is a large one, your junior executives might be provided with this book. He's selling even in the middle of the book. I love it. Gotta love Hank Parkhurst. It's a shame he went out drinking just before the book was published, because he would have been a co-founder, and we would be looking up to Hank Parkhurst, instead of everybody going, who's Hank Parkhurst? Never heard of him. And it hasn't been until recently, in the last few years, that anybody really knows about Hank Parkhurst. Oh, well. After reading this book, a junior executive can go to such a man and say approximately this: "Look here, Ed, do you want to stop drinking or not? You put me on the spot every time you get drunk. It isn't fair to me or the firm. I have been learning something about alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic, you are a mighty sick man. You act like one. The firm wants to help you get over it. And if you are interested, there is a way out. If you take it, your past will be forgotten, and the fact that you went away for treatment will not be mentioned. But if you cannot or will not stop drinking, I think you ought to resign."
So this is this is just one approach. It's a matter of fact approach. It's one that you basically sit down and a junior executive talking to another person is just basically saying, look, we realize that you have a drinking problem. If you want help, it'll be afforded to you. If you take advantage of that help and you do well, then all will be forgotten, and the support will be there. But if you don't and won't, then you ought to resign. If it continues on, then there would be other situations where you wouldn't necessarily ask for resignation. You would just say you're being let go. So again, one approach to this. I often think too with this is kind of as a sponsor. I did get with my first sponsor kind of a short speech, and that is that one, he was qualifying me in the sense that he wanted me to make sure that I truly wanted to stop drinking, that I would stop drinking and do everything possible to stop drinking, and he would work with me. So the same thing, otherwise he wouldn't if I didn't. So this is a very similar type of thing. It's just a matter of fact kind of way of doing it. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rob.
Yeah, but if you cannot or will not stop drinking, will nots do not want to stop drinking, and cannots need detox because they are too far gone. So remember, the cannot stop, they need detox. So, remember in 1939, they would bring these people into their homes and let them live there and would detox them there. We don't have to do that today, thank God, because people can go into DTs, the delirium tremens, and can die. So please, don't forget about that. Your junior executive may not agree with the contents of our book. He need not, and often should not, show it to his alcoholic prospect, but at least he will understand the problem and will no longer be misled by ordinary promises. He will be able to take a position with such a man, which is eminently fair and square. He will have no further reason for covering up an alcoholic employee. Get to unmute, Leo.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So with that, may not agree, doesn't often, and may not and should not necessarily, but at least they have an understanding of alcoholism. At least they have something that they're armed with, and they can actually protect the business as well as the employees of the business, and protecting the business is protecting the employees. And something that they can be more fair in their approach with regard to other employees. Again, this is for a business, and you've got what I would consider is a fairly intimate organization, meaning that they know a lot about each other. So that is something that I think is also a qualifier here. I can tell you that with the organization that I work for here currently, there's not a lot of, we're dispersed over the United States. There's not a lot of discussion about, our intimate side, meaning our personal side. So there's not a lot of that camaraderie, if you will, working. We work well together, we get along, et cetera, but we don't get into each other's business to be able to know just when somebody shows up for work or they don't. So this is certainly another scenario where you have people that are showing up on a daily basis and really kind of get into each other's lives and know something about it. Rob?
Okay. It boils right down to this. No man should be fired just because he is an alcoholic. If he wants to stop, he should be afforded a real chance. If he cannot or does not want to stop, he should be discharged. The exceptions are few. We think this method of approach will accomplish several things. It will permit the rehabilitation of good men. At the same time, you will feel no reluctance to rid yourself of those who cannot or will not stop. Alcoholism may be causing your organization considerable damage, and it's waste of time, men, and reputation. We hope our suggestions will help you plug up this sometimes serious leak. We think we are sensible when we urge that you stop this waste and give your worthwhile man a chance.
Yep. And I'll go back up to this and we'll keep this as relatively short because it's pretty point blank and it's pretty self-explanatory. No man should be fired just because he is alcoholic. If he wants to stop, he should be afforded a real chance. If he cannot or does not want to stop, he should be discharged. The exceptions are few. And that's really what we're getting this down to. Somebody that's wants help, then do everything you can to help them and provide that support. If they don't want help and they are continuing to bring down the business, then they should be discharged and you should move on. Same thing as far as a sponsor is concerned. Somebody that really wants to get sober and you want to, you'll work with them to the ends of the earth. If not, then you should let them go and move on to the next person that does want help. Rob?
Yeah. Now remember that the purpose of this chapter is trying to educate people on how to deal with an employee or a sponsee. Okay, so please keep that in mind. The other day, an approach was made to the vice president of a large industrial concern. He remarked, "I'm mighty glad you fellows got over your drinking, but the policy of this company is not to interfere with the habits of our employees. If a man drinks so much that his job suffers, we fire him. I don't see how you can be of any help to us, for as you see, we don't have an alcohol problem. The same company spends millions for research every year. Their cost of production is figured to a fine decimal point. They have recreational facilities. There is company insurance. There is a real interest, both humanitarian and business, in the well-being of employees. But alcoholism, well, they just don't believe they have it."
Right. There's a head buried in the sand on this one, for sure. So they're just not quite there. They're not educated on the disease of alcoholism, and with all of the things that they talk about in the latter part of this paragraph, meaning the company insurance, they have recreational facilities. There's a real interest in both humanitarian and business well-being of its employees. Well, there it is, in the well-being of their employees. So what they're basically doing is they're punishing the behavior, but not reaching out to fix the symptoms, which is alcoholism. So when somebody's work suffers and they determine that there is something there that is not good, whether they're not showing up at work on time at all or coming in drunk, that type of thing, they let them go. So this is an extreme view. This is one where a senior executive is again got his head buried in the sand and doesn't really realize the importance of this being very similar to somebody else that's sick with some other disease. Rob?
Perhaps this is a typical attitude. We who have collectively seen a great deal of business life, at least from the alcoholic angle, had to smile at this gentleman's sincere opinion. He might be shocked if he knew how much alcoholism is costing his organization a year. That company may harbor many actual potential alcoholics. We believe that managers of large enterprises often have little idea how prevalent this problem is. Even if you feel your organization has no alcoholic problem, it might pay to take another look down the line. You may make some interesting discoveries.
Absolutely. I mean, the farther up you go in the organization, the more detached you become with the organization, it seems like sometimes, and that's true to this scenario that they've actually done here. And the sitting down and actually educating them on the problems of alcoholism can open their eyes and maybe get them to be more interested in it and more interested in the sense of helping the employees that are struggling with it. Rob?
Yep. Of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics, sick people, deranged men. What our friend, the vice president, had in mind was the habitual or whoopee drinker. As to them, his policy is undoubtedly sound, but he did not distinguish between such people and the alcoholic. I love whoopee.
Yep. And deranged. So we're deranged men. So anyway, the problem here is that, well, I guess, I'll refer myself as an alcoholic, somebody that has been sick. I'm not sure I would say that I was deranged, but maybe I'm being a little bit too strong or with regard to the word there. So again, trying to distinguish between other sick people and alcoholics really isn't the way to go. They should all fall in the same place. Rob?
It is not to be expected that an alcoholic employee will receive a disappropriate amount of time and attention. He should not be made a favor. The right kind of man, the kind who recovered, will not want this sort of thing. He will not impose, far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day.
Yeah, so no favoritisms here. This is basically treated like any other employee problem. You face it head on. You face it openly and honestly. You give the support that's necessary as long as the person shows a willingness and an earnestness to recover, and you move on from there. But don't single them out. Don't give them preferential treatment or anything like that. Just make sure that they know that they have the support that they need in order to recover. And as long as they take advantage of that, everything will go fine. If they don't take advantage of it, then obviously it's just like any other problem within an organization. If it perpetuates, it needs to be eliminated. Rob?
Today I own a little company. There are 2 alcoholic employees who produce as much as 5 normal salesmen. Well, why not? They have a new attitude and they have been saved from a living death. I've enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out. And then it's got an asterisk. See appendix VI, which is 6. We shall be happy to hear from you if we can be of any help. Page 573.
Yep. And that brings us to the close of this chapter. Again, this was 2 employers or sponsees. We've kind of talked at great length here with regard to how an approach would be made, et cetera. And from that, I think that we kind of have a nice chapter for a guide on how to work with other people. Rob?
Yeah, I just want to say that I put in the chat, who Hank is talking about is Jimmy Burwell and Sterling Parker, who are 2 alcoholic employees that were working for him. It was a little automotive cooperative where they would, group buying. A whole bunch of small gas stations would get together and become a co-op so they could get better pricing on, services, etc. Yeah, it's a great chapter, on how to deal with an employee or sponsee, and we take this for what Hank did. Hank was an incredible character, and character is a great way of putting it. A dynamo salesman came up with an idea a minute, as Bill Wilson used to say. So do you want to bring Bill into it now?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. Good meeting today. Yeah, there's a lot of good information here in this chapter. And like was mentioned, this chapter can be used as a guideline for sponsoring people because they're telling employers here on how to work with an employee that's an alcoholic. So you can use the same techniques that they're using to work with a sponsee. And back on page 146, it says, he may wish to do a lot for other alcoholics. And then the last sentence in that paragraph says, this work is necessary to maintain his sobriety. He's telling the employers that it's necessary for the alcoholic to work with other alcoholics in order to stay sober. And that's information for us also. We're supposed to work with other alcoholics in order to maintain our sobriety. And that's information for your sponsee also. That's good information for everybody. Remember what they were trying to do. They were trying to enlighten the world on alcoholism. And Hank was writing this to employers. And Hank got most of his information either from the town's hospital or from Bill. Bill found Hank in the town's hospital in 1935. in the autumn of 1935. Hank had been in the town's hospital something like 10 different times, and he still kept going back out. He still didn't get sober. And when Bill found him and Bill explained what Bill went through, the stuff that he got from Eddie, Hank was able to stay sober for at least 4 years. He stayed sober. So the information that's in here probably came from Bill and from the town's hospital. So even though Hank wrote this, it's still saying the same thing that Alcoholics Anonymous would say. He's telling us how to deal with somebody else that's trying to get sober. And that's really what this chapter is about. And most people use this chapter as a guideline for sponsoring people, because there's no mention of sponsor anywhere in the book. Because when the book was written, they didn't use the term sponsor yet. They just didn't come up with that term yet, or they didn't think of it or whatever. So they were just working with each other as like sharing partners or spiritual advisors or whatever term they were using at the time. But this is the real place in the book that can give you some information on how to deal with people. And over and over and over again, it says, if somebody cannot or will not work with you, you got to move on. You got to let them go. And you got to go to somebody else. And that's good information when you're sponsoring somebody. If somebody does not want to get sober, if they're just pulling your chain and they're just there just to get out of trouble or just to get people off of their back, you can be diplomatic. You can tell them where you are. We're always here. Every week we have our meeting, whatever. You're always welcome. Keep coming back. We're glad to see you. But you're going to have to move on to somebody else. Don't waste your time trying to convince somebody that doesn't want to stop drinking that they should stop drinking. I can tell you from my own personal experience, anybody that told me not to drink when I was drinking, I wanted nothing to do with them. That stuff went right over my head. I just turned around and went the other way. It's a waste of time to try to tell an alcoholic that's drinking not to drink. You know, that has to come from inside. They have to hit their jumping off place or their bottom or whatever you want to call it. They have to get to the point where they're willing to do something to stop. You can't force that on anybody. So if somebody will not or cannot work with you, you can be diplomatic about it. You can still be friendly with them, but you got to move on to somebody else. They're pretty much giving us some examples here or some instruction on how to deal with people. And that's really what Hank was doing. And thank God for Hank, because Hank, like Rob mentioned, Hank's the guy that got this book published. Without Hank, it wouldn't have been published. And unfortunately, he went back out and drank. So he did his job, and then he disappeared after that. You know, and the same with Eddie. Eddie did his job. He carried the message to Bill. And then I think it was about two years and 5 months after he carried the message to Bill, Eddie wound up going back out. So both of these guys did their job, and they helped AA get started, because without those people, AA probably never would have taken place, but they wound up going back out. They did what they were supposed to do, and then they took off. So what can I say? But now we have this book, and we can use this book, and it can help us stay sober, and we can use the information here to try to carry the message to someone else. And that's the most spiritual exercise that's mentioned in this book, more than anything else, is carrying the message to another alcoholic. It's mentioned in here something like 72 times. This book says, carry the message to someone else, because that's what's going to keep you sober. Nothing will keep us sober more than trying to carry this message to someone else. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks so much, Bill.
All right, Rob, let's close out with the serenity prayer, and then we'll open it for a few comments.
You got it. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.